Here's the main attraction, what they failed to mention. My hitters on a bank chase. Y'all team came to seek attention. Ballistic show, we in the gym shooting. Mob ties, y'all gon' need forensics. Told me clear the rumors that they spreading about me, no.
We're live. Guys, thank you again for tuning in to the RonPod. I'm excited for this guest here. This is Jake Barefoot. We're about to dive into some real value here that I genuinely believe is going to help you guys. So make sure if you have any distractions around you right now, cut them all out. Right now, just cut it all out. Tune in, pay attention, take notes, whatever you have to do. Because I believe that Jake is going to bring something here to the table that's going to be able to help you become a better version of yourself or overcome some of the obstacles you might be facing at the very moment right now. Okay? So, Jake, thank you for coming on. And before we even get started, I want to ask you one question. What do you believe, what do you believe is the one challenge, or what's one challenge you believe men face right now that's difficult? I feel like I worded that question weird, but let me rephrase that. What is one of the most challenging things you feel that men are going through right now or dealing with right now?
I think there's a lot of change going on in the world, and it's definitely something that's requiring a lot of people to pivot and a lot of people to grow and expand what they have going on in order to keep up.
Yeah.
As a man, you're pretty much hardwired to be a provider, to be good at whatever you're doing. Our jobs and our work are so important to us that sometimes when you have things that mix it up and you got to pivot from one thing to another thing, it can be very, very difficult. And the way that the world is right now, I think the world collectively as a whole is pivoting, and every man in it is having to, embrace those changes in one way or another. And depending on how it's working or not working for people, it can be an incredible amount of stress that it can put us under. And it's definitely something that, collectively we're all going to have to go through. So hopefully during this conversation, we're able to inspire some hope and, let people know that when they're in between different things, that's okay. It all still falls into God's plan, I believe. And if you just keep moving forward, everything will be all right in the long term. I think that's something that we all need to keep in mind and, really, really just think about as we're all moving forward with all the different challenges that were being placed, against us every day. So.
Absolutely. That's it, man. That's very true. It's like you said, there's so many changes going on right now, and there's like so many new things one has to adapt to, right? And it's a lot of pressure, man. It really is a lot of pressure, and I see it driving a lot of people down, And I was talking, actually, we had a recent change here in my personal household that really affected our family. And when I looked at it, it's like, okay, now this is a sudden change. I got 2 kids, a wife, and I have 2 options really. One option is I could curl up and just whine about it, or I can do what's necessary, and that's just to face it, adapt to the changes that are going to come our way, hold a positive mindset, and push through the barriers that we're about to face. And this is within a week now of the changes that have been made, and I'll tell you, the mental state I'm in is probably the best I've ever been, ever. And that's simply because it just comes down to, adapting to the change, and then 2, understanding that, like you were mentioning, we have to pivot, right? And this is one of those moments where, had to pivot. And by staying down, moping around, and just allowing the weight of all the things that are changing just lay on your shoulders, one, you got to give that to God, because if you just leave it on your shoulders, all it's going to do is going to give you an expensive, what I call an expensive response, right? Because when you sit around, you do nothing, you're moping, you're sad, and it's okay to feel something, but it's not okay to stay there, because eventually it's going to catch up, and it's going to cost you.
Yeah, 100%.
So, yeah, that's a big one, man. I'm glad you said that, because I feel like a lot of people need to hear that, and they could definitely benefit out of that. Now, let me ask you this, man. You're here from the United States, but you're now in the Philippines. I want to make sure I got that correct, right? What took you to the Philippines? Was it your business?
Yeah. As kind of touching on on what we were just talking about, there was a big pivot that I had in my life that ended up getting me here. I had some good success early on when I was growing up, my family had a small tour and activity company in Hawaii. That's where I'm born and raised. We sold tours for all the
Mm,
different things that people would do, helicopter rides, snorkel trips, all that sort of stuff. And my dad had been doing it like in a booth on the street for many years. He started it in the early 70s. And I got
mm.
into making little basic websites when I was real young in the early 90s. And in 1996, I made a website for
Oh
my
wow.
dad. It was just something where it was kind of like right place at the right time sort of thing. Um, things things went really well with it. It was something that I started. I was like 12 years old when I made that website. By the time I was 14, we already had over $1 million of sales that had come through it. As
Wow.
I went further on in my career, it sold over $100 million of tour and activities, and I was running a call center in Hawaii, and I was running that with my father, which family businesses can be very difficult. There's just a lot
Mm,
of interpersonal things that can happen there. Um, what I ended up doing was pretty much like withheld very much money that I was making. We were bringing in a lot of money, but my dad couldn't make bad investments fast enough. So it's like every single time I'd get ahead, we just keep getting pulled behind. And I
mm,
ran into some issues in the like around 2015, where I just realized that I was having a really hard time scaling my business there because of the HR that was available on Maui, the island where I'm from. It's a very, very expensive place to live.
I can
Typically,
imagine.
the workforce there it's not really the best HR scene. There's a lot of people there that are retired. They come from a lot of money. They don't want jobs necessarily, or they want a job but they don't really want to work. Other people
Mm,
that are good workers but they cost just an arm and a leg, and it makes it very hard to be able to scale anything. I was just running into all these issues because we had basically two different busy seasons that would happen, and it'd be real busy during the summertime and during the wintertime, and then the in between seasons would be pretty meager compared to the busier times. So I was always scaling up and scaling back down, and it was just like felt like this hamster wheel that I was stuck in. So I decided to come out to the Philippines and start a call center out here to be able to supplement what I had going on over there.
mm.
Went from I started off with just one person to kind of test it out, and I got to about 10 people pretty quickly, and kind of was starting to wrap my head around how to really make things work on this side. And I was exposed to a different business model. Where I'm from on Maui, there's not a whole lot going on, with the exception of tourism. So I never really got to see, Fortune 500 company call centers and all that sort of stuff, which is that's basically what this place here at Cebu is known for. So
Mhm.
I came out here to train a team, and previously to that, things had been going well on the marketing side, but on the HR side was always a real challenge. So I came out here and got that team going, and then I got back, and it was like broken record sort of story. Like we were up 20% for the year. There should have been uh, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank account that were mysteriously disappeared from another bad investment, and it
Oh
just
wow.
got to the point where it was just enough was enough. And I felt like at that point I wanted to just walk away from what I'd been doing, and it was time to
Mhm.
pivot onto something else that was my own thing that wasn't going to be interfered with anybody else. And I took a pretty big chance at that point in time. Basically, like stepped away. There was not good blood between me and my father at that time at all. So pretty much I stepped away with nothing, and
Mhm.
got like some debt financing from one of my friends to come out here and start my own call center, and started very, 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 very basic, um, in like the bad side of town with an office that I rented for $400 a month.
Oh wow.
And I was able to ramp things up over a period of time to where we had close to about 100 people that were working. And then COVID came, and that was another big pivot. I had a bunch of accounts that were in Hawaii. Hawaii was one of the states that reacted, I'd say, probably too strong to what was going on. They completely shut everything down for about
Yeah.
6 months. Most of my accounts completely dried out. Previous to that, I'd also been running a lot of avatar campaigns, which was something that had just gotten like turned classified as a robocall by the FCC, so those were no longer really a viable thing to be doing. The liability of being involved in that was just way too high. So I had kind of two things that hit back to back, and it forced a whole retooling of what I had going on. It was another pivot in life, basically, and ended up just spending kind of the downtime during the pandemic, getting all the foundations and everything ready to really be able to expand once things were opening back up. And now I've created quite a bit of software that really powers my whole agency and has everything going in really a stronger direction than I think it's ever been. And looking right now at taking on, I've basically have self-funded everything the whole way through, just bootstrapped through it. And now I'm getting things ready to put together a raise this summer to do like a fairly substantial seed round that I think is going to be able to propel us, up the charts, to be able to really drastically increase the valuation of what we're doing. And things are in a good spot right now, but it's definitely been many trials and tribulations to be able to get to where things are currently.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot that you get. You seem like you had a bunch of barriers that were right in front of you, and from what you just shared, it's like you just broke through those barriers. You made something out of it that's amazing. That's incredible, and which leads to my next question. What lessons did you learn from those experiences, and how do you feel like it contributed to your life as an individual?
I think that what really has happened with me in the last 8 years is before, when I was working with my family, I felt like I was just in this shadow, and it was really hard for me to really be able to break out on my own and have the confidence in myself to know, what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
And as times have progressed, I feel like I've really been able to come into my own, get out of that shadow, basically, create my own legacy, my own brand. And that's been a very, very positive thing that has allowed me to basically go larger than I thought I was capable of being able to do before. And that's been very impactful to my personal life, to just have that confidence. There was a whole lot of changes that I had during that time personally that just made me a much stronger person, I think, in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without some sort of like adversity or challenge, hard things come from hard places. Sometimes you got to temper the steel with some heat, and in the end, it ends up making things better. So that's one big takeaway that I've had.
You know what, man? The most important lessons I've ever learned in my life all have come through hardships. The hard moments that one experiences, the challenges that you face. I feel like that's where I got the most important lessons in my life that have molded me to be the man I've become, and continue to grow into. And it's crazy because a lot of times, I mean, I don't know if you would consider yourself the same type person, but when growing up, when hardships would come and face a hardship, right? You would want to just ball up and or just run away or ignore the situation, because you genuinely feel you have that feeling of like, if I ignore it, eventually it's going to go away, but it's not going to go away. It just gradually gets worse and worse and worse, right? When you learn how to face those challenges, you learn how to somebody did give me an analogy today. It's a biblical. I don't know if you've read the Bible. It was coming from a biblical place where when he was talking about how, I think it was Simon and Jesus, when Simon came off the boat. I'm probably botching this whole story out. Had to have faith walking towards Jesus, right? And he was using that example. It's like, so we're on a boat, and a lot of times what happens is that when we're on a boat, we start seeing the waves shaking the boat that's taking us to our destination, and we start getting into a panic, and we want to jump in the water and swim back, right? When in reality, what we need to do is hold on tight, get through those waves, and then ultimately get to our destination, right? and that's where you will find progress and all that. So I see that's what I see there in your your story, what you just shared with us. There's so much value there because you shared pretty much like how you broke through those barriers and it's helped you become the man who you are today, and you did not allow it to prevent you from getting to those places that you're building towards. I mean, what you got going over there from the time I've known you, from the little discussion we're having here as well, it's not something small. It's something that looks like it's going to become very massive, and that's awesome. You've put the work in, and for all those listening, take the story as that. Take the story as that. Whatever you're facing right now, you can make something of it. You just got to push through, learn from the mistakes, and keep on continuing on. Now, I have, one of the questions that I had in my head, I'm like, you went from Hawaii to the Philippines. That's a massive change in itself, right? I mean, one culture to a whole. I mean, I've never been to Hawaii, so I don't know how Hawaii is, but it would seem like a big culture shock. When I moved from the United States to Ecuador, and Ecuador back here, it was just a huge culture shock. It was different, right? What kind of mindset shifts or personal qualities have been crucial to your success over there? How did you approach adversity and maintain, resilience in the face of the challenges that you had when you went from the United States to a whole entire world at this point?
Well, there's definitely a lot of differences, especially between most parts of the United States. I feel like I was lucky in a lot of ways because Hawaii does have a pretty strong connection between there and the Philippines. There's about 20 to 30% of the people in Hawaii are from the Philippines originally. Huge Filipino population there. So I think that growing up with a lot of people from the Philippines helped me kind of understand the mindset of it. Also, growing up on an island, definitely helped me appreciate the kind of more island culture that exists. And what I realized was that in Hawaii, it's there's kind of the locals versus the tourists in a way, and like the tourists are bread and butter. That's how we make money. So everyone, hi, but really it's it's us versus them. We're taking their money, and that's kind of collectively as a community, that's what's going on here. It's a similar sort of thing. A lot of the GDP in the Philippines comes directly from the outsourcing industry, which I'm in, or people that are sending remittances that have gone to America and are working different jobs there and are sending their money back to here. So having an understanding that I was an outsider and I needed to conduct myself as that, and like it's not the sort of place where you can just kind of come in with a bunch of money and flash it around and try and buy respect that way. It doesn't work. So with me, I think that it was helpful that I kind of understood that coming into it, and then I think it also helped out that I was so started so small, because it was definitely something where I had to lead from the front, because I just didn't have enough money to pay anyone else to be the leader, so to speak. So by working with everyone day in, day out throughout the nights, like it's all pretty much night shift stuff that happens over here. The East Coast accounts typically start between 8 and 9 p.m. and then go throughout the night. The Hawaii shifts will start a little bit later, but we service quite a few time zones. And there was a lot of just hard work that had to happen, grueling nights, working all night long, and being there on the front lines with people and like letting them know we're in it together. We're working together. I'm not trying to be in the back office and tell you guys to do stuff that I wouldn't do. I think that helped initially make a lot of the just make it an impact and really be able to get some traction in what I had going on over here, because it's definitely a different sort of mindset than a lot of people have that are doing businesses over here that are VC finance things and different sort of stuff like that, where they come in a lot bigger right off the bat. I came in pretty bootstrapped and pretty small, so I think that having that commonality with everyone, working on the front lines with everyone really helped.
Which that leans in right into my next question. When it comes to leadership, right? You're leading an organization, and my question to you would be like, what principles or strategies do you follow for you follow only your let me rewrite this. All right, I wrote these questions down and my Spanish wants to kick in. What principles or strategies do you follow to lead your team and create a thriving work culture? How do you empower and motivate your employees to achieve their full potential? I know you like it's got to be huge because again, I know you said in Hawaii about 30% of the culture there is Filipino, right? But still going into another country, is still a whole entire environment. So within that question itself, how was that? Like, let's talk leadership here a bit.
There was a lot of learning that had to happen.
Yeah.
I went to when I went to college, I got a certificate in HR. That was one of the things that I did. I had a major in management and then minor in marketing and another minor in communication and a certificate in HR management. And everything that I understood about HR was based on American workers. And when I came over here, everything's completely different. In America, cash is king. That's pretty much undisputed. In the HR world here, it's a little bit different. The environment that people are working with is a big deal. People want to have parties. They want to have team building sort of stuff. A lot of times that means more to them in some ways than money does, which was kind of like very odd to wrap my head around that. It's just a much more collectivist culture than it is in America. And when you get people that really are feeling the team spirit, you can turn into like a 1 + 1 = 3 sort of thing because they really are motivated from each other. So one of the things that I kind of realized early on was there are a lot of veterans over here, and I have a lot of friends that have served in the military. And what one of them told me when I asked him, like, how do you, when bullets are coming down and you're in the middle of difficult scenarios, what makes you want to charge forward? Like what's really motivating you? And what most people have told me is that it's not really the flag necessarily or for the country necessarily, but it's the person right beside you, that you're not going to let your friend die there without you doing something about it. And that kind of camaraderie really helps out to be able to motivate people to do stuff. So what I've found is that by having the locals manage each other in the local fashion and kind of trying to step aside from that and let them kind of give the objective of where we're trying to go, but knowing that they're not doing it for me, they're doing it for themselves and their group. And once I realized that was very strong motivating factor here, I definitely kind of leaned into that as much as possible, and that's how I built my management structures, and that's how I built the way that things go, and that's helped a lot with being able to adapt to that, because instead of me trying to completely reinvent the wheel, I'm able to have other people kind of show me the wheel that they're using here essentially and get to see it in action and kind of fall into that instead of forcing my own Americanized way on how things are going. I've kind of viewed myself more as like a bridge where I understand what the clients want. I've done business in America for a very long time. People here, it's a much different, more casual sort of culture when it comes to work in a lot of ways. So I've kind of tried to set the objectives for what we need to do and then leave it a little bit open in terms of how we're going to get there, and really bring in the team's ideas and applaud their efforts to be able to get us to where we need to go, instead of trying to micromanage everything. Because if I try to micromanage and figure out exactly how everything was going to work cross culturally, I don't think I would have had the same level of success.
Wow. Now let me ask you something. You were mentioning micromanaging just now, right? And I feel like I've seen that a lot up here in the United States, and I see like the tension that it can bring to an organization when there's a lot of that, right? So when it came to, you mentioned trying to stay away from the micromanaging, what are some things that like helped you where you want to make sure you run your organization efficiently, right? You have to make sure there's growth. You want to make sure you're not falling back. But at the same time, if you know that if you input too much of that micromanagement, that could affect the morale of a team as well. Am I correct?
Definitely, 100%.
Mhm.
I think that at the top, if you can kind of keep things a little bit more black and white, more of a pass fail sort of situation, and
Mhm.
just kind of make sure that the goals that the organization needs to meet are happening. Um, and if they're not happening, then obviously, you got to let people know that that's what's happening isn't really working, and we need to steer things to a direction that is working. And then obviously, when things are working, I believe in Kaizen principles for business. Constant improvement is very important.
Mhm.
But in terms of uh, if you're gonna if you're gonna set up the basically your business to where you're the hub of it and everything it relies on you, it's going to be very hard to scale that in the
Yeah,
long term because there's
absolutely.
only so much that you can do in a day, and that's pretty much an instant way to lead to burnout. um,
Yeah.
if you try and hold on to everything. So there's definitely some things that you got to let go of, and it's the same thing as like when you have a child that's learning to walk. That toddler phase is so hard because it's like you just look at every single little corner and edge and different thing that they might fall on and bust their face open on, and it's like just gives you anxiety having to watch it. But you can't teach them that lesson. They have to learn it on their own. And
Mm.
when you're growing an organization, things are very similar to that, where it's like you're going to give people the power to really mess stuff up. And it's like same as if your kid falls down and busts his head open trying to learn to walk, you're going to have to take him to the hospital. Anything else that you had that day is going to be not going to be happening. And it's going to cost probably a ton of money and just medical fees, as well as like lost productivity from having to do that. So it's kind of the same sort of situation where you have to empower the people that are going to be the ones who are actually going to be doing things to be able to do their jobs. And you have to kind of like stay hands off as hard as it can be,
Yeah.
while they're learning through that process. And you have to give people enough rope to be able to make mistakes. Hopefully not enough to be able to, you see them wrapping it around their neck too many times. You can jump in and try and save that before they completely hang themselves. But it's nerve wracking. That period of time is very, very hard.
Yeah, it's one of the things you were talking about, how like you don't want an entire organization or entire thing to what's it called, to wrap around one person, right? As an operations manager, I've seen that, and I've seen the chaos that comes with that when it comes between morale, just the operation stuff, client interaction. I mean, so many different areas of a business will struggle when it just relies on that one particular place. But when you empower, and this is one thing I'm a big advocate for. When you have a team, empower those team members to be able to handle those roles. And every detail that you mentioned is pretty much exactly where I would implement in the company I manage, right? Because when you empower people and they know that they have you to back them, to coach them, to help them when they need the help, they're going to better fulfill the jobs that have been given to them. You lay out the plan. Once you lay out the plan, you make it clear to them, this is the goal, this is where we need to go, and this is how we're going to do it. When that's laid out and they move forward, mistakes can happen. You can correct those mistakes. But when you're letting that revolve around you and every avenue is coming to you and everyone is scattered because it's just not, there's no structure to any of that, I've seen bring so much chaos, man. And this is two organizations that just have so much, they have so much room for growth. They have so much, I forget what the word is right now. I feel like my Latino wants to kick in once in a while, so I forget English words. But there's just so much more there that can be done if that was just to be let go and trust. Empower the team and trust the team. Let them handle. I have two kids. I have 2-year-old kids that are about to turn 3 next month. The example you share with the kids, I could totally relate to that. My children themselves, I let them run around, man, and sometimes they get hurt. you know. And when they get hurt, they learn. We sit there, we talk to them, we explain it to them. It won't be happening again because they don't want to get hurt again. You know, but we're not there trying to cover up every corner. I mean, at first, my wife was. I kind of was in some ways. Oh, there's a corner. I don't want them to bump their heads. Eventually, took the bumps out. If you hit your head, you won't do it again. And I tell you, they've learned so much just from that in itself. So, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's powerful, man. That's very, very powerful. Now, let me ask you this: what are some of the being a business owner, right? what are some of the most valuable lessons you've learned about becoming the best version of yourself? And how do you balance personal growth with the demands of running a business? Because I know the type of business you have sounds like it's very demanding. So it's got to be quite difficult for you to balance all those things together, right?
Oh, incredibly.
Mhm.
I'd say that I've compartmentalized it on some levels where I've kind of done one or the other.
Mhm.
I go back and forth between here and the Philippines. I I moved my family away from Hawaii last year. I got them a place up in Northern California in the
Oh,
redwood forest over there. So I go back and forth a bit, and I try and set it up to where when I'm over there, I'm trying to not work as much as I can and kind of
mhm.
have some like planned breaks. And then when I come out here and I'm here, it's all in 24/7.
Mhm.
So most of the personal stuff happens on that side. I try and decompress, figure out which way is up, get into work on different things that I want to work on the personal side, and then when I'm here, it's all. So it's very try and just get into a strong routine. Try and keep my sleep pattern together, which is very difficult when you got to work the night shift all the time and try
Yeah.
to sleep through the day. So I just try and make sure that I get my gym time in, I get my sleep in, and eating good. And aside from that, just balls to the walls, powering 24/7. And that different people have different ways that they work. Some people are more they need to have like a real solid routine, and if they like break from that routine, it
Mhm.
throws their whole life off. Some people are more kind of project based, which I think is kind of where my energy is a little bit better. I get obsessed with stuff, and I just like I'll have a hard time sleeping because I'm thinking about all the different things that I want to do. So for me, it's been freeing in a lot of ways when I kind of are able to just go all in and all out. That works good for me, but everyone has their own ways of what's going to work well and what's going to feel good for them. What I do would probably feel very chaotic and just crazy for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
for me it works well. And you don't have to live for other people, or take their advice on what works for them. It's really important to develop the self-awareness of what works good for you, and then
Mhm.
just lean into that, and do whatever you need to do to where you're going to be the most productive.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing, dude. You know what? You were talking about the hours, and instantly the first thing that comes to my head is like, man, Jake has to have the craziest mental toughness routine up there because working overnight, working those crazy hours. We're doing a podcast at 11 p.m. Eastern time when we had pushed it to 12 a.m. So we got a little earlier, and that's late for me now. Being a dad, and all that. 9 o'clock is my bedtime, right? So in my head, I'm like, all right, push through this, push through this, push through this. This is important. And then you say 11 p.m. I was like, yes, but I'm thinking throughout the entire time. I'm like, man, this is I feel spoiled because I've got so accustomed with the scheduling here, not really having to deal with people outside of, let's say, certain time zones are so far apart, but you deal with time zones all over the place. So I can imagine your sleep schedule's got to be the most insane thing out there right now. Which leads to my question: when it comes to mental toughness, right? This all takes all kinds of mental toughness. Are there any things in particular that you do to really strengthen your mind for any of these tasks that you do? For example, for me, what I started doing, well, I don't know if you've been in the Northeast, because I remember Florida. When I lived in Florida, you turn on cold water, it's cold. But when you turn on cold water here in the Northeast, it's like you're doing an ice bath plunge. It's the worst, right? Your face is burning and everything. So what I do is I purposely put myself in the coldest shower I can, and focus in my mind. So when I come onto the day and have to take on the task of the day, I already dealt with a challenge. I've already dealt with something that has geared my mind to overcome whatever else comes to me through that day. And the gym is also part of that process as well. Do you have anything in particular that you would say you do?
I don't really let myself have any other options. Like how I think about it is, you got to just think of the things that you can control and the things that you can't control.
Mm-hmm.
Like for instance, I come over here on long flights that are over the ocean. And I think sometimes like I'll start getting a little bit of anxiety when I'm on the plane. Like this thing like has any sort of problems, we're gonna crash in the middle of nowhere. This is not gonna be a good
I would like
scene.
flying.
And I just don't even let that thought go through my
Yeah,
head. Like once I hear that thought, I kick it out, and I'm like, I'm stuck on a plane. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm just gonna enjoy myself. I'm gonna listen to my Audible books, and I'm just gonna like tune that out.
that's
So
huge.
I do that
Yeah,
with myself because there's times when I just want to sleep. I don't want to wake up for a meeting. I don't want to deal with people's bullshit at 2 a.m. And I don't have an option. That's what I do, and I'm here. That's why I come here. And I'm trying to create a legacy that will be something that my son will be proud of as time goes on, and will make the amount of time that I spend away from him worth it in the long run. So I try and keep the priorities of what I'm trying to do, the longer term vision,
yeah,
um, cognizant in my brain as much as I can, to be able to let that kind of drown out the other complaints and that sort of stuff. And as time goes on, things get easier. Humans are very, very adaptable. And if you push yourself to get into something, like if you're doing the cold water, you feel that cold water, and then you get used to the cold water. And then, that's just how it is. So
mhm.
it's the same thing over here. It's definitely difficult kind of shock when you first get going with it. But once you get on the pattern with it, humans can do a
Yeah,
lot more than we think we're capable of being able to do. And the as long as you get enough sleep during the 24-hour period, your body's going to keep working. And we get really accustomed to being in tune with the sun and all that sort of stuff. But once you get away from that, I think that it's really freeing. And you realize that there are 24 full hours in a day, and you can maximize it,
yeah,
especially if you just stop like putting limitations on it, which is where a lot of people are. Like Jocko Willink puts his like watch on his Instagram every day. He takes a picture. It's like 4 or 5 in the morning or whatever when
it's
he
insane.
wakes up, and that's just like his pattern that he's into. But like I laugh kind of a little bit when I see those, because I'm like already almost done with work. I show up to the gym the same time as him, but I've already cranked out a whole shift. You know what I mean? So it's like you can get used to whatever it is. And just because we like to sleep at night, it's definitely better quality sleep in the nighttime, I think, doesn't mean that that's how it has to be. So if you drop those kind of limiting sort of beliefs and just go all in on whatever it is that you need to do, and don't let those voices become a distraction, that's really when your true power opens up. And
Yeah,
you feel better about it in the long run, um, knowing that you're capable of doing that sort of stuff.
dude, that's huge because that's one thing I've been putting a huge focus on the past week. Well, longer than a week. You were mentioning like when you were on the plane, right? You're having those thoughts of like I'm on a plane already. Might as well just enjoy that. It's weird. I want to fly, but I'm afraid of flying. It's the strangest thing ever. So when I flew to Miami. It's the same thing. I was freaking out, turbulence. I'm like, oh man, it's over. The plane went to land and took back off because the wind was too strong. It was just a whole mess of things, right? And I had to tell myself, it's like, well, I'm in a big tube in the sky. I can't get off this tube right now either. And ever since that time, that was like recently, you know, I'm like, every time a negative thought comes to my head, I need to just zap it out my head, right? Because there's really no benefit to these negative thoughts, to these limited beliefs. There really isn't. What it does is just sets you back, right? What it does is just prevents you from doing that thing. What it does is that it ultimately affects your health. I was reading this book where it was talking about how stress, and now I don't recall what the numbers are, but just to keep it in short, that when you have high levels of stress, or you're thinking negative thoughts, it affects your entire body, right? So like one hour of being depressed can equal to like days of just like your immune damage to your immune system. Something crazy like that. I'm gonna find a book. I'm gonna tag it in the bottom, and I'm actually sending it to you. I don't know if you've read it, but it's a great book, right? So with those things being thought, I'm like, there's no benefit to these negative thoughts that come to my mind. Why give it real estate in my head? Why not just remove them right off the bat, just as you stated? When that transition happened, man, I feel like I'm more fulfilled as a person, regardless of what's going on in front of me. Because something could be terrible in front of me, and I could get a moment of anxiety wanting to seep in. But the moment I acknowledge the anxiety coming in, and I tell myself, this has no place in my mind. It has no place in my life. I'm going to work against this anxiety because I'm going to find joy in the situation regardless of what's going on. It's been a very eventful year, man. My mom got severely sick. My father almost passed away. And then I got another set of bad news, and amongst many, many other things when it comes to health within family. So the whole wanting to lose yourself mindset wants to come in because you're just seeing those you love so much just going into straight chaos after being fine for some entire lives, really. Going to chaos, and, it's just like, hey, if I go into chaos with everything else, I'm not going to be able to be the emotional support, one, for my family who's also dealing with this, meaning my kids and my wife, two, for myself who's leading this family, and three, for them who are dealing with this. Because I could sit here and just be sad with them, or I can sit here and encourage them to overcome the challenges they're facing. But that only happens when my mental strength is strong. When my mental health is strong, right? You zap those negative thoughts. And as listeners, come onto this episode, that's just the same thing I would tell them. Was like, when those negative things, that's something I would love to share with them, is that when negative thoughts come in your head, I think it was Chad Wright who said, don't give pain a voice. Man, that stuck with me so hard, dude. I hear that, and I tell myself that every single moment, even when the slightest of things come on, don't give it a voice. And it doesn't mean you can't feel anything. It's just, don't give it that real estate, because ultimately it's going to affect you, and it can affect those around you as well. Especially if you're somebody who has big goals. We don't have time to waste to be in a place where we're just sitting there depressed. We don't. We have to overcome that.
I think there's definitely a fine line that you got to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like an example, I think, that is pretty applicable to this, and kind of something that I use in life a lot is, there was one time I was on a hiking trip up in the mountains with one of my friends who was kind of afraid of heights, and we were on this trail that was traversing across this cliff, and it was this thin little trail, big cliff on the side, big exposure, and there's all kind of rocks, and like, if you fell, you're done, and my friend was getting pretty freaked out about it, and he kept looking down and being like, look at all the rocks down there, like, what if I fall, this and that? And I told him, I'm like, don't fall. Just like, obviously there's danger there.
Yeah.
If you're going to obsess about that, and that's what you're going to put your focus on, you probably will fall.
Yeah.
Like, instead, realize that, it's a life and death situation. You need to stay on the trail, and acknowledge that that's there, and use that to steer you in the right way. But don't obsess about the bad. You don't want to be the complete giraffe and just be like, oh, everything's fine. I'm just, or an ostrich that just puts its head in the sand. You can't do that. You have to acknowledge the different danger and different things that are there, and they'll give you anxiety. You'll feel that coming every time. But then it's like, okay, what is in my locus of control that I can actually do to counteract this thing that's giving me anxiety?
Yeah.
And most of the time, you just need to acknowledge it and stay on the path doing what you're doing. And, you want to plan for things to be as safe as possible, but sometimes, you just got to go for it and just stay on the path. Don't die. Don't fall
Absolutely.
off. And that's the main thing.
It's crazy that you share it that way, because last year we had a scare with my son. We put him to bed, and my son he's like me, man. He just double likes to eat, So I don't know what he found, but he had something in his mouth and he started choking on it. We heard him coughing, and it was me and my wife. We hear him coughing through the camera. We're like, what's going on? So he gets up and he's like getting frantic about it. So I go into the bedroom, grab him, and I see him starting to get very flooded and freak out. My wife gets in a panic mode, freaks out. Instantly, I tell myself, focus on the situation, don't panic, forget everything else, just focus on this. Because if I focus too much on like, oh, he's choking, then we're not really going to be effective, and God forbid something bad could have happened. So when I focused, first thing was like, hey, we have a whole emergency kit prepared. Actually, one of her aunts gifted us this thing called a life vac. I don't know if you ever heard of it. You put it over somebody's mouth and you can pull it out. So first thing he said was, okay, lay him down, put his chin up, open up his airways, go in there, grab that, pump that out. We did just exactly that. He turned out fine. And I talked, after the whole thing died down, my wife is freaking out, crying, just like motherly things. And I'm there worried because I'm like, what just happened? We sat there afterwards and I talked and I spoke to my wife. I was like, when these scenarios come on, obviously we're going to freak out. These are our kids. We love our children. But when moments of danger approach, the best thing to do is to try to remain calm and focus on the situation to alleviate this situation. Because if you freak out, get frantic, or focus, like in the case of the person you're talking about, you focus too much on falling, then it's almost like asking for you to fall. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a big factor. I definitely believe that that's something people can benefit from when they really implement it. And it's easier said than done. But when you implement that whole focus on the things that needs to be focused on, not the other stuff potentially was not probably gonna not even happen. You're gonna get a lot better results mentally and just in every avenue, right?
Every time that I've had something come up and I've allowed myself to freak out, it's never ended up well. And it's like when the pressure really turns on is when you really need to calm down the most and just stay in that moment as much as possible, think positive, and just go one foot in front of the other. If you're able to do that, then you're able to get through like amazing, crazy sort of situations and have happy ending at the end. Whereas if you don't, things can get real bad real quick. So I think that definitely applies in business. There's so many different things that you can get your head around, like, well, if this happens then that happens, and it's going to make a chain reaction that's going to make this happen, and all these different things. And it's good to like think through that thought, get to the end of it where it's like, okay, these are the different things that I want to avoid, and then bring it back to the moment. This is what we're going to do right now, and just keep it one step at a time, and don't let the overwhelming sort of thoughts that can happen bring too much anxiety that brings your focus away from the here and now.
Absolutely. It's crazy how much more progress you can make when you're collective about things opposed to just becoming frantic, you know? And it's just a wildest thing. It's like even when you encounter some animals that can pose a danger to you, that people tell you just be calm, just be still, because if you do any sudden movements, it's going to be bad for you. And it's like the same philosophy comes into those things we were mentioning. So that's good stuff, man. And I genuinely believe that if people who are listening to this or will listen to this, if they were to take these things we're talking about right now, implement that in their life, it will be night and day the changes they're going to see, unfold in front of them when something comes up. I tell you, man, again, I've experienced a lot of craziness out of life since I was a kid. A lot of craziness. But this week was different out of any part of my life, simply because the philosophies, the things we just spoke about, were the things that I implemented. So for those who are listening, a lot of you might be somebody who's facing a situation right now that might feel broken, that might feel hectic, it might feel all kinds of craziness. The pieces that we just shared right now, implemented in your life and consistently done so, you're going to see the fruits of it. Okay? So it's definitely something not even just to listen, write it down, whatever it is for you, whatever it is that it will take for you to remember these words that we just shared. Try to remember them, because again, it will change your life. But now, talking about all that stuff is cool, right? Now, another tip I want like something else I would like to share with the listeners, right? What advice would you give them for staying focused and maintaining clarity amidst the daily challenges and distractions that come with entrepreneurship? So when you have a business, right? So many distractions. I know for me personally, there's distractions that come left, right, up, down, right? And having that focus to, having that what's it called? Yeah, maintaining that clarity during those moments. How do you approach that?
There was a pretty powerful experience I had when I was pretty young, when I was just getting out of college. I was having a rough time. My mom convinced me to go to a meditation retreat. She was always into that. My mom was kind of a hippie. And I went to this 10-day long Vipassana meditation retreat. And I think that was the hardest thing I've ever done. Just like sit there in silence and just breathe for 10 days straight. It was it was very, very difficult. And I think about that sometimes when things get really crazy. Come back to the breath and you can feel it. It's like for that time, it's like you just start off kind of focusing on feeling the breath come out your nose and go against your mustache and your upper lip, and then kind of put your focus through different parts of your body. But if you can kind of have some sort of thing that you can use to draw yourself back to center when things get really wild, that allows me to be able to get back into a clear state to where I can make a good decision and kind of like slow down that whole anxiety and all the different kind of things that can spiral into. And that's been a very helpful thing for me, is to kind of be able to go back to that centered place, or at least like have the awareness that that place exists. And when I get real far off from it, then I can, have a good perspective of like this, I'm off center now, I need to get recentered. And that can be a very good thing, instead of just leaning into the franticness and the chaos, to try and keep the calm through it all, is, I think, the most important thing by far. And when you have that kind of place in your head, then you can look at all the different things in a more objective sort of way, rank them, figure out what is the main priority, what's the first fire I need to put out, and then work your way down the list from like the biggest fire to the smallest fire. And then if you just get comfortable in the fact that that's what you're doing, typically, is like a leader within a business, a lot of time you end up being the fireman. It's just putting all this different things out in addition to other hats that you're wearing. That's one of the main things that you got to do. So to be able to prioritize, is this something that's going to burn everything down? If so, put whatever you're doing down and deal with that, and then come back to whatever you're doing. If not, then try and keep as organized as you can. Just go through one thing, finish it, move to the next thing, finish it. And if you're trying to speed through things, I found that a lot of times that doesn't necessarily work so well. If you're just trying to get something done and not get it done in the right way, get it done 100%, that's really gonna mess you up. And where the place is that you can save the most time is in between tasks. If you can minimize that time in between tasks, that's you can move from one thing to the next without having a bunch of downtime in between. That's time that you can save. That's not going to have there's no negative impact of that.
Yeah,
really. You can just go from one thing to the next. And then when you're doing one thing, just try and do it until it's all the way done. If you can, if you get distracted from it, try and come back and pick up where you left off. But if you can get to where, things are being completed and you're not just making a bunch of loose ends, I think that's probably the best way to go about that sort of stuff.
That's deep. That's deep, because that's one of those things I've struggled with for so long. There's 2 points there that I want to break apart. One is the completing one thing at a time. Completing it, make sure it finishes. I grew up, I guess some will call it ADHD, whatever they want to call it. I just think it was just discipline issues that I needed to fix, right? And what do I mean by that? For example, let's say right now, if we weren't on the podcast right now, I'm working on a graphic. As I'm working on the graphic, for some reason I just find myself then writing a blog, or then working on something else, or just walking out. It's just too many things. I start taking on too many things instead of focusing on that one thing I started and not finishing it. The better results I started finding is when I stuck to that, said no to the other things I know are not the priority, finished that thing. And when I finished it, I also wanted to make sure that I wasn't rushing through it, which was the second thing I struggled with. I would rush through things. And when you rush through things, it just makes everything worse. I'll be honest. You ever just like go about your day and you're rushing through things and you start dropping everything, you just start, losing stuff. And you're like, what is going on? It's so chaotic. It's because you're rushing. Just slow down. Think about what you're doing. Focus on what you're doing. And as you do that, you're not going to just start dropping the ball all the time. You might make your mistakes, as you mentioned, but then you could just regroup, come back, and continue on what you're working on. So that's a huge lesson there. I'm grateful that you shared that, because like I mentioned, that's something I've struggled with. I've definitely come a long way for it, but I know so many other men who deal with that same issue. Even successful men. Like I've been around others who are making a lot of money every single month, but man, how they're scattered and they still don't finish tasks. I'm like, geez, dude, like you've made it this far. I can only imagine how much further you can make it if you were just to focus a little bit more on what's going on, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it's definitely a game changer there. Um,
That concept is
yeah,
basically what I use to start my whole company, because I have a similar sort of working style to you. I got, every checkbox of ADD I got checked on my side. I'll put things in piles and do all sorts of weird shit.
yeah,
So it's definitely like a constant battle that I have on my side. But what I found works really well for me is that one of my strong points is I'm pretty good at juggling things. So I
mm,
can normally have, I try not to, but I can have multiple things going on and be able to deal with multiple things at the same time pretty effectively.
mm,
So what I've felt has been a really good thing for me is just to get into delegation and be able to lean into that,
of
where it's
course.
like I'll try, and I know that the finishing of things is one of my weak points because I'll get sidetracked in something else. I have some other sort of fire that comes up that I got to deal with. So I've tried to actively make it to where I have the bare minimum on my plate that I'm actually doing. And I try and delegate as much of it as I possibly can to other people. And then I can kind of lean into my strong side, which is juggling, a couple different people, a couple different projects at the same time, but then using their time to be able to finish it. Cause I know that mine is very hard to have that focus time for uh, an extended period. It gets difficult for me. So that's kind of been my secret of how I've been able to really push through a lot of that.
Mm,
Is to kind of shift more into the project manager role as much as possible, because that's something that is one of my strong suits versus sitting down there and having to focus and just get through something all the way to finishing. It's very difficult sometimes
yeah,
to really push myself to be able to do that.
yeah, yeah. Definitely agree with that. And those are huge factors. So, guys, as you listen to this, man, again, write this down, record it, whatever it is you have to do. These are all pivotal things that are going to help you transform who you are, because this is not just something that can just simply be applied in business. This is just in your job, or if you're in school or in your everyday life. You apply these things here and you're going to see massive change. I know, like we were mentioning earlier, how I've been working on making the changes necessary, um and I've seen the fruit of it. I met this guy many years ago. I met a guy who, we were sitting in a church group on a table at a coffee shop, and he told me, he goes, "You know what I do every year?" I'm like, "What do you do every year?" He goes, "Every year I choose one word, and that one word is the word I carry for the year for me to focus on for personal development." I'm like, "That's interesting." So I forget what his word was at that time, but I carried that with me. And this year I told myself, this year the word is discipline. The word is starting something and finishing it, regardless of how you feel. I saw how much weight I gained. I'm like, no, this is not healthy. So I told myself, I'm gonna get myself back to a healthy weight. So I'm started it. I've been working on it. I've been trending down, and I'm gonna finish it because discipline is the word. So if some of you guys listening are struggling with some stuff, choose a word. Choose a word to make that your goal, and just follow through with it. You know what I'm saying? Just go, focus slowly, as we mentioned. Don't try to just rush through things, and try to keep that focus there. And if you find yourself scattered like we have, ground yourself back to where you need to that point, and get rolling. But before we close out, I want to ask one more. I want to just ask one more question. And the question I wrote down was, what is the most valuable piece of advice you would give to men who aspire to become successful business owners? What key principles or actions should they prioritize to unlock their full potential and achieve meaningful success?
I would say that the number one thing is to drop your ego as much as you
Mm,
can,
wow.
because as you're growing a business, lots of people have different things that are reasons behind it. They want to become more significant. They want to become more recognized. They want to have, whatever it is.
Mm,
And I found that um, when I step away from that, like one thing that I did earlier this year, which was kind of made me eat my ego, a little bit. I don't really normally work for other people. That's not something that I've done. I've been lucky in a lot of ways that I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life, and I haven't had to. But with me, there's kind of like a, it almost feels like if I get to the place where I'm working for somebody else on their program, then it's like it goes against my self image of who I am. And
Yeah.
something that I decided to do this year is I realized that um, everyone in my family has done businesses. My mom, my dad. I never really saw much people doing like the traditional 9 to 5 sort of thing. It's always entrepreneurship. So that's like in my blood, and it's always they've done like real bootstrap sort of things. Never really understood financing, investments, kind of how to get through different phases to even be able to make an exit from a business. And I decided this year that that's something that I wanted to understand. I wanted to level up what I have going on. So I ended up taking a sales job, which I'm currently doing in my spare time, helping people it's like a company that helps people get appointments during like a raise, a round of funding that they're doing with different investors. So I've basically been talking with 8 to 15 different people every single day that are either looking for funding or they're private equity fund managers that are looking to expand their network. And I've found that I've been actually able to get paid significant amounts to go to school and learn stuff that I'm trying to actively figure out. So instead of just wasting my time watching YouTube videos and trying to wrap my head around it that way, I've kind of taken the hit personally, where it feels really strange to work for someone else, especially
Mhm.
like my boss is 25 years old. So it's kind of like it's definitely I've had to kind of eat it a little bit
Yeah.
personally, but the amount of growth that I've gotten out of that has been just exponential. And I've really kind of wrapped my head around how things work on that level of business and really been able to plan out my next couple moves in a really great way where it hasn't come from um, just real desperation and not really being, trying to just piece everything together. I've had like additional money that's been coming in that's made me, have less anxiety, be real calm, to be able to make different decisions. I have all my personal uh, my expenses for my personal life are all covered. I can make my mortgage payments and everything from this side job that I've brought on, and that's allowed me to kind of compartmentalize. Okay, what's my business? What do I need to um, do to have this thing be able to run on its own, to be able to fully grow, which has made it
Mhm.
that stronger. When everybody knows that I'm busy for a significant amount of the time and they can't just lean on me to help them with every single thing, it allows them to be more empowered with what they're doing. So there's been benefits on that side. And then I've also just been learning a tremendous amount personally in that realm of business that has always been very blind spot for me.
Mhm.
So sometimes, you're going to, if you want to get to where you're trying to go, focus on that and don't focus on the other things in the meantime. Because like I feel that I'm getting closer and closer to being able to make a good exit and be able to make it all really kind of pan out into something significant. But I don't think that I would have been able to get that clarity if I was so stuck on being, I'm an entrepreneur, I don't work for anyone, that's beneath me, that kind of attitude. Because that was kind of like it's just been an underlaying sort of thing that's been there throughout my whole life. And to, focus on like, okay, am I looking for the status? Am I looking to feed my ego, or am I trying to get done what I'm trying to get done? And to be able to kind of separate those two things and really focus on what I'm trying to get done. Like I'm already up here, up all night, every night, and I've gone that far with it. So like, why don't I eat a little bit more of my ego and, work for a 25-year-old guy to be able to learn really, really valuable information that's going to help me going in the future. So, I think that if you can kind of have that long-term view and be willing to do whatever it takes, you're going to get to where you want to go.
Mhm.
It's the same thing if you're, looking to, you're making money and you could go spend that money, you could be flashy, or you could take that money and you could still live like you're poor, not let that go to your head and just make long-term investments. In the end, that's always going to be better. That's always going to be better if you can, kind of silence the ego and have power over that as much as you can. And that's my tip on that.
Man, I'm gonna put, so I got this new app to do edits on videos, and there's one emoji on there. It's like a bomb. Bradley, I don't know if you know Bradley does it. I'm about to add that right there with the explosion sound for everybody to really get this knowledge here. Yeah, dude. Like, let me tell you, man. That was a great response. That's, I feel like every man fights that, the ego situation, especially when they're going through those steps, the first steps of personal development. Myself, ego has set me back in so many ways, especially when it comes to like asking for help. Right, that is so huge. Today we were just talking with the guys I was with today. We spoke about that. And we're talking about like how you have to drop that because it's okay to ask for help. There's a lot of people who are willing to help, want to help. They just don't know who needs the help. You know what I'm saying? They don't read minds. You got to ask. Where I'm getting with that piece, with that part there, is that when you drop that ego and you step in faith, or you step into a position like you did, or you ask for the help, you're going to get so much more value than just staying with that mindset of, as you stated the example, I'm an entrepreneur, that's all beneath me. Or, you know what, man, I'm a man, I can handle it all, I don't need any help. It's just, you'll get so much further by dropping all of that and asking for the help, or just working for the individual who's going to give you value, that's going to ultimately help you grow into where you're walking into. So that's huge, man. That's huge. Jake, I gotta say, man, this was a refreshing conversation. Like I said early in the podcast, this podcast is like, I was like, all right, I want to learn so much more. I want to pick the brains of other people who are doing it, who are up and hustling every single day. But I don't want to retain that information for myself. I want that information to be shared with others who are battling through their battles. From where I grew up, there's so many people who feel stuck, and it's like, you can get out of that. You just need you just need to look for the information that's out there that's going to encourage you and teach you how to get out of it. And it's out there. And I want this to be one of those outlets that help those people get out of it. So I want to thank you personally for just, coming on here, taking your time out of your busy schedule to share the words with the people who are potentially going to listen to this. And man, guys, if you're listening to this, I really, 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 really hope you take on every single piece of information here that he shared, implement it in some way in your life so you can see the benefits from it. Don't let this just to be another episode playing in the background. Let this something that's actually going to add value to your life that you're going to be able to utilize. So with that being said, thanks again.
I got one other thing I want to throw in here before we wrap
Drop
it up.
Drop it.
One thing that I think is, especially for people that are in America, for men that are in America, you need to realize how lucky we are and how things are set up to where you can just keep cycling through, because you learn it, especially like with all the time that I spend over here in the Philippines. People here do not have easy access to capital. They do not have bankruptcy protections that allow them to just completely fall on their face and then pick themselves up and start over again. In America, you do. And once you really wrap your head around, the things that are there, and how it's set up to where you can go from nothing, you can file bankruptcy, you can ditch all the different debts that you had previously, you can get access to capital in a way that is unheard of in other places, especially over in more third world countries. Like here, people that are down here, they're down and they're not getting up. It's going to be like multiple generations that it's going to take for people to be able to move forward. Where with us in America, there's so much opportunity. And it sounds like a broken record, it's like people say that, but it's true 100%. And if you're having, a time when you just feel like your whole world's caving in, let it cave in, start over. You can do that in America. And that's something that we have going for us that is not spread around the world. And once you really wrap your head around that, especially like if you can, take the ego thing that we were just talking about. Yeah, you failed, you got stronger, you let things, you can move forward from there with more strength and more competency than you had previously. So every failure doesn't have to end you. And how we're set up is like you can actually try a couple times to be able to get through things and then still keep going until you figure it out. Yeah. So the main thing is just don't stop. because we're set up to win. Like, we are set up to win. You just got to keep going. You're going to figure it out. If you don't figure it out, pick up the pieces, start over again. It's not the end of the world, and you can keep going. And eventually you can get to where you're trying to go. And that's something that is very, very powerful, especially if people are in, a time that's a dark time where they're just feeling like everything's falling in and the world's going to end. It's not. It's just a temporary thing. And in the end, what's going to happen is there's contrast. Without darkness, you'd never be able to see the light. Without light, you wouldn't be able to see what's light if there wasn't darkness. So they're both two sides of the same coin. So you're going to have bad times that are going to set you up to be able to appreciate your good times more than you ever would if you never had the bad times. So just experience them for what it is. Sometimes when things completely suck, everything's terrible, you're running out of money, you're eating some crappy food because you can't afford anything else, just laugh about it inside. Try and just find humor with it and be like, this is where I am right now, but I'm not gonna be here forever. This is just the story of where I'm at right now, and from this I'm going somewhere else. And when I get there, I'm not coming back to here. And if I do come back to here, I remember what it's like to be here, and I know how to get out of here. So that's a very powerful thing that we have.
Man,
that can really help our mindset if we realize the context of everything that we have going on as Americans.
It's almost as if you were sitting with us at the table earlier today that I was talking about, because that was also part of the conversation we were having, right? What you said is so important. It's huge. Look, I lived in Ecuador for 5 years as a kid. The opportunities presented there are definitely not what you get here. One of the gentlemen I was with this morning, we were having coffee. I forget what exact country he's from in Africa, but I believe it was the Congo or somewhere in the Congo. My geography is crazy. Don't judge me. Don't persecute me. But he came from a place, man, where they had no lights, because it was very tribal where they lived. They had to walk a good 2 hours just to get, water. They would have to walk an hour just to get an education. If we had to go to school and it took us more than 20 minutes, that's a drag. These people had to walk an hour to get to school, 2 hours to get water. The amount of stuff that we have available to us here, from what we see as the simple stuff, as electricity, water, food, there's so many others in so many places, as Jake has stated, don't have those opportunities. We have the opportunity to start over and keep on moving, which is one of my driving factors, because I think about it when I want to complain and say, man, these are whatever. I think about my family who's overseas, over in Ecuador or wherever else, and they want to come here for the opportunities they don't have over there. So yeah, exactly right, Jake. Remember, here we have opportunities. We have the opportunity. No matter, I don't care if you come from the hood. I don't care where you come from. Because I have homies who came out from the hood and they're doing very well for themselves. And they came from straight the streets. Supposed to be statistics. But they're not. So that in itself is just a living testimony of what you can do in this country, regardless of how hard things are right now. So I appreciate that you share that, because I am a big advocate about that when I speak to people. When I speak to people and they start giving me all sorts of excuses, I'm like, dude, I don't want to sound corny saying this, but honestly, man, there's so many others who would die to come here just to be in the position that you're in. So just be grateful for what you have and get yourself out of, if it's a shitty situation, get yourself out of it. Work hard because you have the opportunities to do so. It might be difficult, but you know what? Good things in life don't come easy. Just get out of it. Just work towards it. So yeah,
you can always draw on those hard times later on for perspective too. Where it's like every problem that you're having, in the moment feels like a big thing.
Yeah.
But then when you look back on it and you're like, well, I've come a long way. This is, I'm not like running out of food and broke as hell right now. Like it's, I've made, a couple steps up, and then the things that are bothering right now, you can put it in the context of how far you've come from your bottoms, and that can just really kind of keep the perspective of things optimistic, which
Amen.
is that's the main thing. If you can keep those negative feelings out and try and stay as positive as you can, that's the superpower of humans. I think, is being able to just keep that perspective going, because especially over here, I see people that they're coming, what you call in American standards, like they're living in dirt, like literally they're living in
Yeah,
dirt floors,
I
shanty
believe
towns,
it.
different sort of things like that. And it's like there's some they don't let it get them down, and it's like some of those people are the most smiley, happy people. And then it's easy to like look at that and be like, how are you even like how am I seeing you smile right now? Like, this is crazy. But like, if you kind of just learn from that mindset and just, try and be grateful for everything that happens, whether it's good or bad, I think that's the best place to be as much as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. That drives in a point, and we were talking about again earlier in the dinner. The breakfast we were having. Um, if we could give one piece of advice to anyone, is go travel the world. Go see the different cultures and see how people are living. It'll give you a different perspective. 100%, it'll give you.
100%.
You know,
100%. Highly recommend that to everybody. I can't believe how many people in America don't even have passports.
yeah,
So if you want one positive action step to do today, that if you don't have a passport, go get one, and then save up for a plane ticket, go somewhere, and you'll come back a different person. It's definitely
absolutely.
a very, very important part of life.
Absolutely. And I know a lot of passport bros are out here nowadays, so it's starting. But all right, man, thank you so much. And you know what? I'm excited. I'm excited to get back to work. I'm excited. It's 12 a.m. here. I want to wake up at 4 a.m. and just get to it, because the energy that was just giving, the value that was given here really, really was impactful to myself. And I know for a fact it's going to be impactful to others who listen to this. So I want to thank you for that. Now, for
Thank you
everybody
for
else,
having me on.
appreciate it
Glad that I could share some stuff with you that was helpful.
a ton, man. That was so much value there. And now it's time for us to get to work. Take care.
All right, enjoy.